I'd like to welcome Nicole Stoddart to the stage. Nicole is the CEO of the Metro Tunnel Project Office, which oversees the delivery of the Metro Tunnel project. And this will bring the biggest change in the metropolitan train network since the opening of the City Loop in 1981. Nicole has extensive local and international experience, and before joining the Metro Tunnel Project Office, she headed up the design and development at the Suburban Rail Loop, and for a number of years she was the Managing Director of Construction Services at ACOM. Please welcome Nicole.
Thanks, Tanya. I too would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land of which we meet, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any other Indigenous Australians we have with us today. I'd also like to thank Tanya for the introduction and Open House Melbourne for inviting me to be part of this exciting event. I'm thrilled to be here on behalf of Metro Tunnel Project Office to give you a brief overview of our city shaping project, which is set to open in 2025. As you may know, the Metro Tunnel is one of the Victorian Government's flagship projects, a signature project for the Big Build program and the biggest upgrade to Melbourne's rail network since the City Loop opened in 1981. Together with the project contractors, the Metro Tunnel Project Office is responsible for bringing the state government's vision for the Metro Tunnel to life and delivering the benefits of the project to the Victorian community. The Metro Tunnel will free up capacity in our City Loop to allow more trains and more passengers to travel on Melbourne's train network every week as our population grows to some 9 million in 2050. For those less familiar with the project, the Metro Tunnel includes 2 twin underground tunnels and 5 new underground stations. These include Anzac Station, which will connect you into the Shrine and to the beautiful Botanic Gardens, Town Hall and State Library that connect into our CBD and have direct connections to Flinders Street and to Melbourne Central stations. Parkville is a world-class healthcare and educational precinct, and Arden in an urban renewal area for North Melbourne. You'll hear much about our stations today. We also, within our stations, we've got our brand new trains, high capacity signalling operating systems, which will allow bigger and better trains to run safely, closer together through a turn up and go service. These connect the Sunbury line to the Cranbourne and Pakenham lines, which connects 97 kilometres of continuous rail through the Metro Tunnel, creating better access to jobs, to health and education, and better connecting our communities. We're now at the most exciting phase of our project, with test trains travelling off the surface and through the tunnel and back out the other side, stopping at our 5 new stations, including State Library Station, which is right beneath where we stand today. We are running high-capacity metro trains, high-capacity signalling, a first for Victoria, and are working through a complex phase of testing ahead of opening in 2025. We're also making sure our station infrastructure works together to provide an exceptional travelling experience. That includes the lifts, the escalators, the power, security, and our Victorian first platform screen doors. Work on the new 5 underground stations is progressing at pace. Major construction of Arden Station finished in January this year. And this week we announced completion of Parkville Station, which is, as I said before, is at the centre of our healthcare and education precinct. And it looks absolutely fabulous. I can't wait till you all get to see these beautiful new stations. Anzac will be the next station to be completed, followed by our 2 CBD stations, Town Hall and State Library. It has been a mammoth job so far. Some 7,000 workers have brought together this project, and we've touched, so much of the community, and we really appreciate the support we've had in bringing this project this far so far. It's a complex underground, network there, and when you do see it finally, you will appreciate just how much work has been going on underground at the same time as having an operating city above. I could talk for hours about our new fantastic Metro Tunnel project, but I'm going to leave it there for today. And it's wonderful to have Ivan Harbour here from RSHP and Ingrid Backer from Hassel here to talk about the design of the Metro Tunnel stations and lots of their showcase projects from other parts. And, it really amplifies the unique qualities of each location and celebrates the craft and detail together with the Victorian Government architect, who's also here, Jill Garner, to share her insights. I feel incredibly fortunate to be playing a role in delivering the Metro Tunnel project, which will change how people move around Melbourne and how people use our city and state. Together with my incredible team, many of who are here with us today, we're delivering civil infrastructure that Melburnians can be proud of for years to come. I'll now hand you back to Tanya. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. It's wonderful to have you all here with us today, celebrating rail in our city as we shine a light on the design and architecture of the new Metro Tunnel stations. The Metro Tunnel project is not only critical for our growing city, it's also unique in an international context. It's a world-leading project. The Metro Tunnel station designs are a collaboration between 3 international architecture practices, UK-based firms RSHP and Weston Williamson and Partners, and Australian-based Hassel. Today, Ivan Harbour from RSHP will talk a bit about their work and explore how architecture and design can contribute to the public life of a city and look at the important contribution rail design can make to the public realm. Following his keynote, with Ingrid Backer from Hassel, we'll delve into the design of the new Metro Tunnel stations. And following these presentations, with the Victorian Government architect Jill Garner, we'll explore the contribution of the new stations to Melbourne's civic realm and unpack the design and delivery of this exciting rail and infrastructure project. So let me first begin by introducing Ivan. Ivan's an architect and senior partner at RSHP. He was a director in the practice from 1993 and a founding partner of Rogers, Stirk, Harbour and Partners, which was established in 2007. The practice became RSHP in 2022. 2 of Ivan's projects, Terminal 4 at Barajas Airport in Madrid and Maggie's West London, have won the Sterling Prize. And if anybody knows what the Sterling Prize is, it's the UK's most prestigious architectural award. Ivan is currently leading the design team on the Melbourne Metro Tunnel project, and his work spans many building types, from airports to low-cost housing. He's deeply involved in design from city scale to the smallest detail and works across the practice to ensure the ethos and design quality for which the practice is renowned. Please welcome Ivan.
Thank you very much. I'll just set my timer up. I think I've been given 40 minutes, so hopefully I'll keep to time and not bore you all. So here I go. So, okay, I've got my title slide. So I have to say I'm very honoured to be able to speak to you here, and I'm honoured and absolutely overawed by the teams that I've been working with here over the last 7 years. This is a city-changing project, and city-changing projects of this scale and importance, they're only possible through collaboration, cooperation, and a lot of hard work. Now, I'm a really small part of a much bigger team. I have part of my team is here, part of us are back in London, but this is being done with a team in Melbourne. And it's that collaboration and that cooperation that has made this amazing project possible. The quality of the workmanship that we're seeing in Metro Tunnel and the pride that those people putting this together, which I think is testament really to the dedication of everyone involved in the construction. This is a project for 100 years, 150 years, maybe even longer. Melbourne is my wife's birthplace, so I certainly couldn't afford to let her or my relatives down. But I'm cautiously optimistic that your metro is going to be globally unique. Right, let's move forward. Oh, hold on, have I gone back? No, I've gone. Right, okay, now I'm looking at the thing here and it's telling me what happens next. Okay, it's the wrong way around to what I'm used to. I'm not going to talk about Metro just yet. Kelly's given a bit of context about me. And I'm going to show you some of our work and what I believe is its success in engaging people, because this is what Metro Tunnel is going to be about. Civic, really, in the true sense of the word, so buildings, civic buildings in the true sense of the word. Civil, in the polite sense of the word, and that is buildings looking after the public realm around them, being contributing to the public realm and not being defensive and pushing it away. And all, of course, for the citizen directly. All this stuff needs to come together to make a city. I've worked in our practice for 39 years now. It's a long time. Much of that journey, Richard Rogers was our figurehead, and this building that you see here. Oh, sorry, I'm going to keep reading the wrong one. Sorry. Okay, so it's that one. I'll look back. It's probably easier. The history of the practice. This is the founding project of the practice, done in concert with Renzo Piano. And, this building, I think it really epitomizes what our practice has been about ever since this was built. It's before my time, so I'm not that old. But it's still as radical today, I think, as it was when it was conceived now 50 years ago. Richard described it as a place for all people. And to that end, there was a competition, 600 entries, and it was the only one that gave over half of the city block to a public place, a square, a place. It envisaged really a non-monument with culture, arts, and a library sort of at its heart, a big flexible container really for anything that goes. And the open-ended structure that you see here is something. It's a scaffolding for the citizen. The piazza is not just horizontal; it's vertical. It's a place both for the formal and informal. And I think the ad hoc nature of what it is encouraging around it's almost a showground for the citizens of Paris. It really was a city-defining project in a city, of course, that was all very well defined already. The next founding project that I want to talk about relates to the city. And this is a project that was done when I was a young architect, just started at the office. It's called London as It Could Be. And it was a provocative proposal which was exhibited at the Royal Academy in 1986. And this really was the foundation of the practice's work on cities, which was then taken by Richard into government and has been very influential, particularly the concept of building a city building upon itself, the use of brownfield land as being the place to build rather than spreading. This scheme, the plan here, I hope you can read it. It's a hand drawing. Remember those if you're an architect. It was about London refocusing on to its river. It was about humanizing the public realm. And it was really about connecting the cultural quarter, which is on the south bank. All cultural quarters seem to be on the south bank, with the West End to the north. It called for the removal of a rail line, interestingly, which literally crossed from the south, and still does today, and lands on the north at Charing Cross. But of course, in doing that, it blights the neighbourhood to the south. So it was really about balancing the city and bringing more equality to it. what we looked to then was to say, how can we give it back to London in a dramatic way? And of course, I think this image and the model image shot there took all the flack and all the interest. But actually what it said was, and on the top left was the original bridge before it was demolished. I think they reused the suspension cables, or Brunel used them at Clifton in Bristol. But the bottom left is that bridge, the Hungerford Bridge, the rail bridge, as it was back in 1986. It's not a beauty. And I think the idea was to bring back some of that spirit of movement through the city as previously, to really allow people to re-engage with their river. It also called for the sinking of an urban motorway, which was actually part of an embankment extended by the Victorians on the river on the north side. That was to rediscover the city's relationship with the water and to make a really great promenade. It called for change to Trafalgar Square, to take out what was effectively a big roundabout and to give that back to the people too. The only thing that came out of this project was that. Pedestrianised finally in 2003. So it's step one. There's plenty of time yet. So I want to run you through a few civic projects that have been certainly part of my career. And the first is a law court in Bordeaux in France, which we designed in 1992. I consider really this as my formative work. It was the first time I had an opportunity to sort of express myself. And looking back now, I think it was a real step change in the practice's architecture. It brings the human scale, and it's perhaps less overtly mechanistic, but still rigorous and a great integrity about it. But also, it's conceived in a broader context. So it talks about not just placing a building, but also changing the neighbourhood around it. And let's see how visible that plan is. The plan on the left there envisaged the pedestrianisation of a major street and really the taking over of the space around the cathedral by the people. Again, currently, or at that time, sitting in a roundabout. About 10 years after we finished the project, the street was pedestrianised, and it has a tram now running along it. The space around the cathedral has the tram running around it. It's for people. At the time we proposed it, they said no chance, this will never happen, but it did. The building is very legible in its function. So on the left there, it's pretty obvious where the hearing rooms are, but it also says there are other parts to a law court. Most of a law court is office space. It makes the building more approachable, more understandable. No one wants to visit a law court. So to make you as an architect, what you shouldn't do is make it worse. You can only try to make it better, give people optimism about how they would have to engage with the building that they don't want to be in. But at the same time, it still has to have a level of formality, a level of civic presence in the city. The site was juxtaposed with a historic tower and wall, 11th century tower. The site ran around the tower. We chose just to sit next to it, very close. It's about 2 meters away at its closest. And I've always said that the tower will be standing long after our building has disappeared. But really the aim was to make this civic building something which was more educational than correctional, and something that spoke to and locates you very clearly within the city around you. Following on from the law court in Bordeaux, we picked up a second law court in Antwerp. This was in 1998, but a much bigger scale thing. And really interestingly, this sits still, and now it's been built, on the site of a station that was sitting on the edge of the city, the old city wall, which is a ring road, which has now got, is probably the biggest defensive thing of all. It's a sort of ringed city. And of course, the site not only is addressing the ring road to one side of the city, there's a road passing underneath the site, and the whole place is heavily defined by this infrastructure that accessed it at that time. The project was a catalyst also for a new city quarter on the old marshalling yards. And on that drawing to the top left, there was a plan that we developed as part of the project, and that plan has now been substantially built out. As I say, it's heavily defined. The place is heavily defined by the existing road and light rail infrastructure. But our aim, really, even in that complex environment, was to create a dynamic gateway that would just help consolidate the city spaces. And at this distance, the daylight through that main hall to the distance is super important to suggest this isn't the end of the city. The city is continuing. Right at the foot of the building, the trams, and you can just make them out there, circulate around and they pass underneath the stairs. Law courts, both in France and in Belgium, have to have stairs. It's part of the brief, and it's all about being grand and being civic. In what's called the salle des pas perdus, literally the room of the lost footsteps, it's a rather ominous term, the connection back to the city is clear. So the building engages very much with the city, very much with that infrastructure. And the public rooms, the hearing rooms, all sit across the top of it. And that was important too, was putting a stressed public that have to visit this building, they don't want to, they have to put them in a place where they get a moment to look across the city, a calmer place, and giving them a panorama. And mitigating this fact that they're in a law court. The next civic building, which is a truly civic building I want to talk about, is the Welsh Parliament. And this sketch is a sectional sketch, and it describes a relationship between a cover, which keeps the rain out, a public realm, which sits across a surface, and then an operating parliament space, government space, which sits below that. It is about putting the electorate above the elected, not the other side of a wall, but so that there is a relationship that allows a parliament without doors, effectively, so that democracy can be seen to be done. It's also an outward-facing building. It engages and embraces passers-by. The building encourages gathering and the attention of the interested and also the uninterested. It's something that really draws you in. And within it, we've really created a living room for the citizens of Wales. You're not guided once you're in that space. Once you're in there, you've been through security, you can do what you want. It has the cheapest coffee, apparently, in the neighbourhood, so it gets lots of people. No, it's they have lots of events, but everything's informal in this space, and it's a lovely way that a building that's so important for a state is able to manifest itself on a day-to-day basis. You can also get little glimpses to the action below, as I was saying, electorate over elected, so you can have a little view of the space below, and this is the debating chamber, where you can sit in a more formal environment, overseeing that more closely and more directly. This little project here, I say little, it's a big project, is about our thinking in terms of healthcare. This is the first hospital that I've ever worked on, working with many experts to really try and deliver a very different approach to what is a cancer centre. It's at Guy's Hospital in London. It's on a really tight corner site. So tight we couldn't make the building square. It's a triangle. It's literally half a building block. Not the ideal shape for anything. The building, the basic concept was around creating a very clear distinction between the spaces for the art of care and spaces for the science of treatment. And that was enabled us to sort of free up the spatial complexity and interest in the places you spend more time, and whilst not compromising the spaces that have to do the hard technical work. And really importantly, this is a tall building to bring some gardens further up so that we can have, really have a proper hospital garden at all levels. The section here through that, and the colours represent different, essentially different areas: chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and I think there's a sort of day case, and then there's a sort of staff area. But probably the major leap this building made was in a tall building and a hospital where you're confronted with just so much signage, you're anxious, you don't know where you are you there at the right time, etc. The lifts here have 3 buttons if you're a patient or a member of the public, and they don't even indicate what floor you're on. You're either going to one place or another, and it doesn't matter, and that's the important thing. When you arrive on those floors into what have been called care villages, you become you're in a world that's then you're looked after because that's the reason you're there. You're looked after in that specific way. All about reducing signage and the anxiety that goes with it. I apologise. I hate architectural pictures of no people, but in the hospital it's a difficult one to get people to. You have to pose your models. You can't have real people. But that view on the right is the reception. So as you walk in, that's what you see. And there's a little table there, that's the reception desk. And it's so far away from what we expect, or come to expect in this healthcare environment. An artist created all of the seating, and the seating makes space, but also creates a sense of sort of drama and interest. It's definitely not business as usual. And the building, you can see that on the left there, it's very clearly expressed in its external elevation, these very distinct parts of it with their own outdoor spaces. So that as you arrive in those care villages, they have their own little volumes. They are able to use materials that don't need to comply with as closely with the strict requirements of the clinical areas, and it just makes the whole thing a little bit more human. Plus you get access to outdoors, which is super important. So the last of the sort of civic projects I'll show. It's actually a shopping centre. There you go. That must be a civic building these days, but with a difference. So this one is a shopping centre which has repurposed a civic monument, a bull ring. In Barcelona, the Catalans gave up being interested in bullfighting years and years ago, so it was surplus to requirements for a long time, but it was a historic remnant of the city. And our repurposing of it, and it being constrained by that historic envelope, is very important in the product. I think on a square grid, building a circular building, you'd have difficulty today, so we took the advantage. But most importantly, this building, although it's mostly retail, it's taken the public space, which was the bowl to watch the bullfighting, it's put it right on the top, and it's created an amazing sort of overlook across the city with a sort of multi-use space that can be used for events at the centre of it. At that upper level, there's a promenade that circulates around the perimeter. It's a sort of passeggiato in the evening, and it's lined with restaurants with this venue behind. And it's become a sort of must-do destination in the city, both for people living there, but also for tourists and visitors. And of course, down in the bowels, in that circular form contained by the old bull ring, you still get the shopping centre. But interestingly, for the first time, a shopping centre actually constrained a little bit by the architecture. And despite those who know anything about retail, they always say architecture gets in the way. In here, it doesn't, and apparently it still makes a lot of money for them. So everyone's happy. So going on to the word civil, and this is the one I said, it's about being polite. And I'm picking up some private sector buildings. And the responsibility, I think, that all buildings have to engage with the public realm, even in the smallest way, to make it welcoming and to have a positive effect to the city around them. So this is a building in the City of London. It was a speculative office tower, so big that it covers its entire site. And the move we made here was to effectively lose the lower 6 floors, to allow them to be open and part of an extended public square. So the developer gave up a huge amount of potential revenue to create a place which becomes a destination and without controls that you can just walk through as part of your everyday as a passerby. The building's been nicknamed the Cheese Grater, as you wonder why. And it got that nickname because actually not only does it address the public realm very closely, it also thinks about how it sits in the environment and the silhouette of the city. This is a view from Fleet Street. If we'd built that building square, it would have sort of overpowered St Paul's Cathedral on the right there. So it was lent back. This was all in negotiation with the planners. We were allowed to go much higher, which is the reason it was built. And the other compensatory factor was that at those lower levels, it becomes an open, sort of welcoming and very different way of addressing the street about it. The height of this opening relates to the cornice height of a neighbouring Lutchins building. So it continues the street line, but in a reverse sort of way. And I think the most important thing is it extends an existing public square, an adjacent public square, and together they provide, really this much-needed breathing space at the very heart of the City of London. So moving to Australia, this is Sydney, Chifley Square in the CBD, and here we're looking at a similarly speculative office building on a very small north-facing site, and an ideal opportunity to sort of extend the public square with a hope that in the future the road that runs through the middle of it will eventually disappear, as it did in Bordeaux, and we'll be able to consolidate a place for all people, certainly within the lifetime of the building. And the open lower levels, similar to the Leadenhall building, the Cheese Grater, really create a civic portico, a sort of 21st century portico, which really is quite formal, addresses the public square, and importantly brings the scale of the building down to people scale when it touches the ground. Great advantage of this arrangement facing north is, of course, that in the winter the sun comes in, and in the summer it stays out. So it's almost the perfect arrangement for ensuring it does the best for passers-by throughout the year. And it really sits on a walking route that crosses the site from one station to the heart of the CBD. But of course, we had to go a little bit further, being Australia, and in celebration of your amazing outdoor culture. And we repeated this idea of big outdoor space to celebrate your outdoor culture further up the building. In fact, somewhere in the middle and also right at the top. And so the tenants in this building almost get their own building to themselves, and the sense that they're sort of standing on another and they've got their own ground and their own relationship with the great outdoors. Oh, that is legible, good. Now, you wouldn't have thought this would make the list of civil projects. This is a business park in West London, the last place, really. It's an island, and it's hemmed in by rail tracks running around the top and to the left there. And on the south, there's the terrace back gardens. The main road is on the right. So there's one tiny connection to the road infrastructure. And just next to that, and just on the other side of that road, is a railway station. So you can get to this place, but it really is an island in relation to that. The main move here was, which is super important, is that cars were basically banished from the centre of the space, and they run around the perimeter. They also tuck under the building. It's outer London, or sort of outer central London, so car parking is still permitted here at this time anyway. The landscape in this place was put in first to establish its credentials. So the that landscape has been growing now for probably almost 20 years. It established the place. And then the buildings were built over 10 years, all using a common language. It evolved over time, discreetly. And the logic to that was not just so that we could get all the work, but they should be background. And if the buildings had been fighting for being present, then they would have overtaken the landscape as the prime logic behind this plan. And the park's occupied all week long. It's a business park, it's got workers in it, but particularly at the weekend, it's used by the local community. And it really is. Once the workers have gone, they flood in. And like all parks, it's got places for gathering and places to find solitude. But super unusually, this is a complete piece of private land. So it's the gift of the owner of that land to the community around it. So this section, I'm talking about the citizen. And buildings that work directly for the citizen, basically transportation. Stuff, that fundamentally has to get you from A to B. And this project was mentioned earlier. This is Barajas Airport, Terminal 4 in Madrid. These are the railway stations of the late 20th and 21st century. They're the gateways to our cities. And the case of Barajas from Europe to South America, it's a gateway to South America. It's the first airport I was involved in, and a huge project and with great complexity. It's bringing together not just air travel, but also we've got to get rail in there, we've got to get metro, and of course, cars. And to make it possible, there's any of you know about your square meters, 1.2 million square meters of construction in this project. We designed it all as a single module. It's repeated about 500 times across the project. And the module was designed to be linked and extended in two directions. So in future, and in fact we're now re-looking at doing that, extending parts of it within the language of the original. So that module, and playing with the light and that repetition, just brings this beautifully gentle rhythm to this vast building. It really paces the space, and it helps de-stress passengers on what are inevitably long walks through it. I often meet people who say, "Oh yes, I loved it. It's a long walk," and I just say, "Well, I know. I apologise for the walk, but was it a nice walk?" And they usually say yes. And I think that architecture at its best has been described as poetry or music, and I think in this building we get quite close to that. And the colour choice, I'm sure we'll get onto colour later with Metro Tunnel, but here each note really in that music is given a personality through its colour. And of course you can choose your favourite. I like this image there with the girl standing by her column. Interestingly, the colour was a political choice. It wasn't an architectural choice. Standing in front of the minister, we made suggestions. Could it be red? Could it be yellow, let's say, or whatever colour? And we were always throwing back, sorry, that belongs to this political party, that political party. We could quickly see we were going to get to black and white. So, as myself and a colleague, we were mumbling in the back, and we said, how about every colour? And on the spot, took a while to think about it. He said, yep, go for it. That's decision making for you. And of course, it's remembered for its colour, this airport. This is my first metro station. It was designed about 20 years ago. And the drawings you see here are sketches that I did, which were making a commentary on a reference design that we'd been given. It's in Kaohsiung, southern Taiwan, an industrial city, very much about boat building, and this was for their central park. The comments really were all around concerns about the experience for passengers and for the place, and the suggestions to improve that experience, which really the suggestion was, it would be great, wouldn't it be great to bring the park to the metro, to bring the light to the metro, and to make the metro itself, the metro space itself, more airy, to remove the ceilings that were put in, just give yourself more volume. The proposal really was a simple, elegant canopy, and this is it seen from the main street side. Don't you just hate all that sort of stuff that people put along roadsides? Anyway, if that wasn't there, you'd have this very elegant piece of structure made by the local aluminium boat building industry. So it looks effortless, 60 by 40 meters, made in a number of sections, welded together in the park, lifted up with 4 cranes. It's an extraordinary piece of construction. It's basically a boat, a flat boat, very slender and elegant, as seen from the street, as you say here. And from the park side, it has a more substantial presence. And of course, the next image, which is really what it's about, is that the moment, it's all about the moment, emerging from metro to something that draws you up to the light. And Ingrid will talk about light in Metro Tunnel here. It's a photo moment, it's the Instagram moment. And it's common, whenever we go here, you'll see couples having their wedding photos taken, like they do in Parliament here. And I understand, although I've never looked, that it's featured in amongst the world's top metro experiences. So again, that's somewhere where we hope Metro Tunnel here will make the grade. This is a metro station in Naples, and this is where we're bringing airport together with metro. So this, I won't rub it in, guys, but this airport doesn't have a metro connection, so it's going to get one. And importantly, it was an opportunity to help organise the mess in front of the airport. As we all know, when you arrive into a country through an airport, it's a mess. It's very rare to find an airport that's, I have to say, Baracus is an exception. It's very rare to find an airport where you don't just have a mess of stuff to do with, cars or what have you. Anyway, so our site is quite a big site. So we're looking at, that red line. This is what we're engaged in to try to sort of sort that out for them. But, if an airport is a gateway, I think, to a city, the metro is certainly the front door. And I think that in that context, it is more than just a piece of efficient circulation. But of course, it still has to be a piece of efficient circulation. In this instance, the metro is 50 metres below street. I believe Town Hall is 35, and this is a deep metro. This is a really deep metro. And as part of that, it's really too deep for escalators, considering that many people coming from the airport will have bags. So it's animated with panoramic lifts, still under construction, you can see here. And the yellow spiral, those are escape stairs. So we've basically made a circular hole. It's a good formed circle when you're digging a deep hole. And we spiraled the escape stairs up through that space. At the bottom, we've got a sort of piazza. It's open to the sky. It's still not finished. It takes a long time to do civil engineering. This one was started before Metro Tunnel. Still not finished. We're hoping next year. And finally, the city. It brings all these things together, all the things I've been talking about, and the successful cities. So I'm just going to get my... Oh, there we go. So the first one to talk about is Barangaroo South. It's been a huge success. Barangaroo South in Sydney, mixed use. It's become a destination for residents, Sydney-siders, visitors, workers, everyone. And that is by the sole fact that it's connected well to the transport infrastructure. It was crucial, and it was a key outcome in the design. So the front door of Wynyard Station, which is, of course, the station under the centre of City of Sydney, the door of the station through a tunnel was drawn out towards Barangaroo, and a sign put on the end saying Wynyard. And so the station has been brought to the doorstep. Psychologically, you're right there. On the water side, the ferry, it's taken pressure off Circular Quay. It's brought the ferry, a lot of the ferries from the west come here now. And then between it sits Barangaroo South. Fine street grain, you'll recognise that here in Melbourne, in the laneways. Built for people, definitely not for cars. And it really has successfully turned a backyard into a new front door. And in the process, we did the master plan and we did 3 commercial towers, a financial engine really that was enabled the city to construct a significant public headland, and then eventually a public park, which will total together about 50% of the precinct for the citizens of Sydney, the Sydney-siders. On the other end of the scale, and a very different challenge here in Qinghai, in Shenzhen, with southern China, this is a project that's ongoing. This is a city that's been built rapidly from scratch over the last 2 decades, and it's still massively under construction. Inevitably, perhaps, that lacks the fine grain of a city that's evolved over time. And this project really has been designed to create a form of urban living room, but also whilst creating a sort of interchange between 4 different underground stations, which include a fast train to and from Hong Kong. It's about 1.2 kilometres long, and what it will do is bring a much-needed piece of contiguous open space in the heart of the city that then connects to a seaside parkland. It mediates between a number of levels, above ground and below, and the form of it is all about creating gathering and event spaces along that route. And it does really aim to humanise the streetscape, to set itself as a foreground against the massive scale of the towers under construction in the background. So the final project I want to talk about, which is, I think, very pertinent, is a project in Florence, on the outskirts of Florence. It's quite a modest project by scale, but a really important project for this what was, and still is a suburb on the outskirts of Florence. And it's as a catalyst really for positive change in the existing communities. So on the bottom right, this was a plan to put in a light rail link from the suburbs to the centre of the city, all because of congestion, and particularly tourist congestion, and eventually this link goes out to a park and ride through some of these suburbs. The top right is a diagram that's part of one of our cities books, which is about how we think cities should be, which is polycentric, and not one focus and suburbs, dormitories on the outside. So this town was currently really seen as a dormitory. If you lived in Scandicci, you would say, I live in the outskirts of Florence. So to the top left is the available space. You can see there's 2 communities, and between that there's a space. That's the space, of course, they run the light rail, because it's an open space. And our master plan drawing on the bottom left is really saying, what are the opportunities by bringing this through to unite those communities and create a sort of critical mass and perhaps create another centre, so the idea of this polycentric city. That same little diagram was overlaid on an aerial, was actually describing that unity. That became the official emblem and graphic for the project, quite interestingly. But the plan, which for the first phase, and to really get this place, is very simple. It just places 3 buildings, a cultural building with a sort of flexible space, a small office building on the right, and a bigger residential building with retail, and a tram stop. But then, really importantly, then between those and facing upwards up the page there, up to the north, a piazza. Of course, this is Italy, we've got to have a piazza. And as at Chiswick Park, the focus on the gathering space, so the importance of the piazza is it's reinforced by adopting one language for the buildings. So it begins again, the buildings not dominating, allowing the space to dominate. And the piazza now, it's occupied by people living in Scandicci. When you ask them now, where are you from? And they say, I'm from Scandicci. I'm not in the dormitory town or the suburbs of Florence. It's given them pride in their place. And, we'd really like Metro Tunnel really to bring all those aspects to Melbourne. It's going to add new points of focus to the Hoddle grid. It'll arrive at the city in a different way, be perceived differently, not through the streets on the tram network. And I think that'll undoubtedly change the way the city is perceived in a positive way. This was a series of sketches done back in 2017, which says they were moments, Instagram moments. So it is of the moment, and probably isn't anymore, it's probably TikTok now, but anyway, whatever it is, it's making a record of saying this is a moment that I capture and it's part of my experience. Within the stations themselves, that experience, which is going to be fast and efficient, but also uplifting and very human. I was in actually this station, in the platform yesterday, and these are grand spaces, but they have an intimacy about them. And that intimacy is being created by setting off what is this extraordinary piece of civil engineering that is very evident, but set against it what we call precision engineering, components that have all been made by craftspeople, all local to Melbourne. So it's very much made by you guys for your metro. And those special moments that occur at each portal, the one thing they have in common is they're all about rising from below and addressing the city above. And that's the end of my piece, and so I'll be handing to Ingrid, who will then explain all of the detail.
Ingrid needs the clicker.
Yep.
Great. Thank you, Ivan. That was a really wonderful introduction, I think, to RSHP's work, and also an understanding of, I suppose, the relationship that we're trying to build in terms of city making with the civic realm. And you can really see, I suppose, the key takeaway that I found from that is that the civic engages the city. And I think what Ingrid's going to show us now is how the civic engages the city a little bit more. So I'd like to introduce Ingrid first. Ingrid is a Principal and Board Director and Joint Project Director of the Melbourne Metro Tunnel Project at Hassel, where she's worked in architecture and interior design for more than 25 years. She's a highly respected architect and has led teams on a large variety of significant workplace, residential, hospitality, retail and commercial projects. And what I love about Ingrid is that she knows to make change, you have to participate. She's an advocate for gender balance in design. She sits on the awards committee at the Australian Institute of Architects and was admitted as a Life Fellow of the Institute in 2022. She's been a guest lecturer at RMIT and UQ universities, and she sits on the Property Council of Australia's 2023 to 24 Victorian Division Council and is the chair of their Commercial Office Committee. And Ingrid's here today to give us a great overview of the stations. Welcome, Ingrid.
Thanks, Tanya, and thanks so much, Ivan. That was so great to see that body of work, and I think it sets the scene so nicely for what we're going to talk about today, our Melbourne Metro project, which is going to be an international class project that we as Melburnians can all be super proud of. I'm just going to start my timer. I've got about 10 minutes, so it's a big project, and I'm going to just try and give you guys an overview. We've got a few months before it's going to open in 2025, so I'm sure there'll be other opportunities to delve into a bit more detail. It's my privilege to present this project to you today. I'm one of, as Nicole said, thousands and thousands of people have worked on this project. So it's a huge privilege for me today to present this to you. The design of the stations, as mentioned earlier, is a collaboration between Hassell, Western Williamson and RSHP as part of the CYP joint venture that also includes the engineering team of AAW, which is Arup, Arcadis and WSP. Hassell has also had the great privilege of leading the design of the landscape and the public realm around the stations, and also the two overstation developments that sit above Town Hall Station and State Library. So the Metro Tunnel project is creating 5 new stations and precincts for Melbourne, including 16,500 square metres of new public realm. It will connect to the Sunbury line in the north and the Cranbourne and Pakenham lines in the south, as Nicole mentioned earlier. Over 9 kilometres of twin tunnels, and also includes 4.5 kilometres of new separated bike lanes. This slide really shows the impact this project will have on the city. The Metro Tunnel project has some really clear overarching design principles, and you saw some of those in some of the Instagram moments before. Each of the stations at ground level really relates to the context of that part of the city. But as you get deeper into the metro, the stations themselves have quite a consistent language using these precision engineering elements, as Ivan was just talking about. The concept generally is for an open metro, and that not only relates to the amount of natural light, and I'll show you some examples of that shortly, that pours into the stations, but also around inclusivity and accessibility to all. This is going to be a really great project for all Melburnians. There's a generosity of space, and that's actually not very common in metros around the world. As I said, the station entrances above the ground are designed to fit within the context of the part of the city that they're in. One of the ways we've done this is through materiality, as you can see on this slide here. So Anzac Station has the timber that relates to the really natural environment that it sits in. Arden with its brick, which is really talking about the industrial heritage of that place. Parkville with the tree canopy, it's going to add to this whole new boulevard along Grattan Street. Town Hall with the stone relating to the beautiful heritage buildings that we have around Town Hall, the cathedral and the Town Hall building itself. And of course State Library here where we are now, with concrete in this really urban environment that we're in now. So I'm going to run you through all 5 stations, sort of starting from the north and going to the south. As I said, quite high level, but we'll see how we go. So Arden's a catalyst for a whole new precinct. It's going to be the first building, or it is the first building as it's already finished, in what will be a whole new development for this north part of the city. The brick arches through the entrance tie into the industrial heritage of its location. Here you can see a section drawing that's going right through the station down to platform level. So you've got the entrance on the left, the 3 large skylights in the middle, letting lots of natural light down into the platform level, and a services building on the right. Arden is what they call a cut and cover station, which means that the box of the station is actually constructed from above. Parkville and Anzac are also cut and cover, whereas the 2 CBDs, because they're so deep, actually get mined using the tunnel mining machines. Just a bit of technology there for you. Here we're a bit deeper into the entry of the station, and you can really start to see the detail of the brick arches. This plan here just shows where the station's located in that Arden precinct. So the entry is over on the right-hand side of the image there on Lawrence Street, and it's just down from Arden Street to the north. It also shows the extent of landscaping which is designed to deal with the flooding which happens in this part of the city. And the station itself is actually built on a plinth, again, to keep it safe from any flooding. Now we'll move to Parkville Station. So Parkville's a real connector. As Nicole said, it's in the heart of one of the best education and medical precincts in the world. And it's going to be creating a new front door for Melbourne Uni and connecting it with the whole medical precinct and making it just so much easier for people to get to. The station itself sits under Grattan Street, and here you can see the very long skylight that's built into the enhanced pedestrian zone on the north side of Grattan Street. Again, here's a section that cuts through right down to the station level, and you can see how the light is pouring in from the skylight all the way down to the platform level. This is the main entry off Grattan Street at one end of the large skylight. And here you can see the concourse below the skylight. It's actually acting as a kind of street beneath the street. So there's going to be a whole lot of retail, food and beverage, just a great amenity, particularly for the university students, but also for the wider medical precinct. And you can see just in plan its relationship to Grattan Street, which is running through, and Royal Parade, which is running north-south. And it's got entries, all the stations actually have multiple entries, and it's going to make it so much easier because people on the hospital side will be able to enter the station on the left-hand side of Royal Parade and go underneath rather than having to cross the road. And that's again another shot just showing those skylights. Now we'll move to State Library, which is kind of right below where we are now. So it's going to provide access to RMIT, obviously, and the whole shopping precinct. The entry is made up of large concrete portals that, again, allow natural light as deep into the station as possible. This one's probably the trickiest one to get natural light into because of its really urban environment. But this station connects underground through to Melbourne Central Station, allowing people to transfer between the stations without leaving the ticketed area. Again, here you can see a section through, and this is down at the platform level, showing that double height vaulted space that Ivan showed earlier, showing just that generosity of space. It's actually quite breathtaking when you're down there. It's almost cathedral kind of scale. And this plan just shows you again its relationship in the city. You've got Swanston Street running north-south, La Trobe Street on the bottom there, so the main entry buildings on that corner. But you've also got entries up at Franklin Street, and there's a whole new pedestrian area at Beckett Street as well. And this just shows some of the landscape and also the ancillary buildings along Franklin Street. And then that's a Beckett Street, which is a whole new pedestrianised zone. And then at the other end, you can see how easy it's going to be for the RMIT students, particularly to access this other entry at the north end of the station. There's also an overstation development above the main entry on the corner of Swanston Street and Swanston Street and La Trobe Street, and it's a mixed-use development with some commercial and student housing. Now we'll move to Town Hall. So Town Hall is really going to be creating a new civic heart for the city and providing a great new meeting place in the enhanced city square. This section shows you the space underneath the city square. It's been nicknamed the crypt space and is a huge triple height or maybe quadruple height space that will be able to be enjoyed by the public. This plan shows you again the relationship of where it sits in the city. So you've got City Square on the left, the entry from Federation Square on the right, and the main entry building which wraps around the back of Young and Jackson's there on the corner. Swanston and Flinders. Really lovely story that the Town Hall station connects underground to Flinders Street Station via the beautiful heritage Campbell Arcade. The arcade previously couldn't be accessed by people in wheelchairs. It's actually been closed for many years, so it's now going to be accessible to all, and it's just a really beautiful space. And then here you can see this one of the other entrances located on Federation Square. So again, people will be able to access the station from the south without having to cross Swanston Street or Flinders Street. So you can imagine when Moomba's on, people will be able to come straight across the river and get straight down into the station without going across the road. Town Hall also has an overstation development that you can see here. It's a new mixed-use development with 2,000 square metres of retail on the ground and 16,500 square metres of new office space above. It also connects into Flinders Lane behind the old Nicholas building. Oops. And so adding a whole new kind of public realm and laneway connection. Last but not least, we've got Anzac Station. It's a pavilion in the park and it's a multimodal transport interchange connecting the train and tram network. It'll provide great access to the Shrine, the Botanic Gardens and Albert Park Lake via a new public realm in the Albert Road Reserve. Here's some great sections through the beautiful timber floating canopy that again shows you how much light can pour into the station from above. And that's a little bit of an AXO diagram. Here's some actual photos, particularly the one on the right. So it's a render on the left and a real photo on the right. And you can see the beautiful diamond-shaped skylights, again letting in this huge amount of natural light whilst keeping everyone protected from the rain. The station entrance sits between the tram lines like an island on St Kilda Road, so allowing passengers to transfer from the train to the tram and vice versa, again without having to cross the road. And you can see here the really wide tram platforms. And this is designed to really deal with some of those large crowd events that often happen in this part of town, big Anzac Day marches or the Grand Prix. And the plan here shows you the extent of works along St Kilda Road, but also this new park that's coming down into Albert Road, which connects you down to the lake. And again, there's an entrance on the other side of St Kilda Road that will give access to the Shrine. So again, just minimising people having to cross the road. As I said earlier, all of the stations have their own identity on the ground, but there's a really consistent language that runs through, and there's these beautiful elements that run through all of the stations. So these are the beautiful drawings done of one of the light fittings, one of the drum lights. These are huge, huge light fittings, but really beautiful. We've also got a series of ceiling ribs that tie all of the stations together in a language of different relationships, I suppose, of where the ceiling ribs are. They help with wayfinding, they help with just orientating and giving this consistent language. And again, we've got these, we call these the shark teeth, and they're a ceiling baffle that's really helping with acoustics, and they're often in those transit spaces between the platforms, which we call the adits. But we'll give you more detail on that as we get closer to opening, I feel. Now I'm going to show you a little video. I hope this works. This is some drone footage that was taken just recently of Anzac Station. Thanks so much, everyone. Go and sit there.
Thanks, Ingrid, and thank you, Ivan. As you can see, these stations are going to need a lot of unpacking, and we've got some unpacking to do before they open in 2025. I'd like to now invite Jill Garner to the stage as well to take a seat, as well as Ivan. And I think we're going to take a little bit of a look at my favourite station footage. We're going to go back to Arden Station now. And I think you can see from that footage what a wonderful collaboration this project has been. Just before I sit down, I'm going to introduce Jill. Jill is the Victorian Government Architect, and she's got over 40 years' experience across practice and government in Victoria. In 2015, she became the first woman Victorian Government Architect, and she leads the expert OVGA team. In her role at the Office of the Victorian Government Architect, she's an advisor and advocate for exemplary design. She chairs the Victorian Design Review Panel, advises on a diverse range of government competition processes, reviews a wide cross-section of government and private sector projects, and has an outward-facing role engaging regularly with industry, universities, state and local government bodies, and with the broader public, like today. As a passionate advocate for architecture and design in government, and a commitment to building legacy for our community, Jill promotes the value of contextual, integrated design thinking and a collaborative approach across design disciplines. Welcome, Jill. In many ways, the stations could have been simple and efficient and effective, but we can see that they've got much larger aspirations, and I'd wonder if you'd talk about the government's aspirations for these stations and the Metro Tunnel project as a whole.
Yep. Can you hear me? Yeah. I mean, I think the topic of today's discussion probably says it all, that there's several different ways that a city can approach public transport, and I do think our metro has chosen, right from the 7 years ago that Ivan talked about when the project kind of began, it was probably even a little earlier than that, because it's been obviously conceptualised and visualised and envisioned as to what it was going to do for the city. And right from the beginning was this idea that let's contribute to our city, and rather than let's use this moment of celebrating public transport. We're a city that actually really is quite proud of our public transport. And you could do it in a couple of ways. You could hide your entrances to your metros in the bottom of buildings, and we see that in London, where there's just maybe a sign and you head down underground and find a station. Or there's that alternative that we find in a lot of cities globally, where the station becomes a celebrated part of the city, and a bit of a marker helps you know where you are, and it becomes part of the language, the architectural language of the city. So really embedded in the ambition right from day one was the idea that the metro would layer our existing city and add to the context of each of those places where you would enter it. Even though below ground it's a connector, but above ground it's a bit of a symbol, I think, and perhaps a symbol of the city's commitment to public transport, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really beautiful. I think you can really see very clearly from Ivan and Ingrid's presentations the ability of, I suppose, public transport to connect the city and tie the city together in a way that not, in a very different way to, you know, other kind of elements within the city. And I think that what was really interesting that we can understand from Ivan's presentation is the role that the metro tunnels, you know, play in a kind of a broader or an international context. And I was wondering, it seems to me that this project is unique, and I think it was described as unique. I was wondering, from each of your perspectives, what is the kind of most unique thing about the stations? Ivan, would you like to start?
It's me first. This project, as has been said by a number of people, including myself, it involves the participation of a huge number of people, and that is, you know, includes across the design perspective. And
Oh, that's better.
There you go. I'll use this little one. Right, here we go. I'll start again. I can't remember where I started now.
A huge collaboration.
Oh yes, sorry. You know, it's been a huge collaboration across not just the thousands of people involved in constructing it, but also the hundreds of people involved in designing it. And I think that, this, as someone who's coming from outside, I'm a very small part in this process. And I see this, what has been developed here. This isn't my hand. This is the hand of the hundreds of people who've been involved. And so it's, my skill, if I've got one, is to get people to get excited about doing something. But we do this together. The result is the coming together of minds, resolving problems, because architecture, to be honest, is mostly about problem solving. Often problems you've set yourself, but problem solving. And because it's a unique group of people putting it together, it's a unique response. And I think for me, it has been a product of the process in this special city. It's a special product.
And Ingrid, for you, what was one of the most unique moments?
I think just as a Melburnian, just feeling the pride that I think all of us are going to feel when it opens. I just need to mark that. It's going to be amazing at really unlocking the city and making it much, much more easy for people to move around. But I think, as I talked about in the presentation, the concept of an open network in all of the kind of ways you could interpret what that means, that's the thing that makes it really unique. So lots of natural light, really, really intuitive wayfinding. People will be able to navigate through the stations really easily, and I think enjoy the actual act of travelling. So hopefully we add a bit of joy to people's daily commute.
And of course it's going to turn out better than those stations in Sydney, isn't it, Ivan?
I don't know. I wasn't involved in those, so I have no idea.
We were involved in some of them.
Sorry, I just had to sneak...
Melbourne's always just that little bit better.
I had to just sneak that one in there for the crowd, obviously. Jill, what makes it unique for you?
I think it's going to become, and this has been alluded to by several others, probably all three of you who've spoken, is this is going to be part of Melbourne's architectural tourism, in my mind, no question. I think, tourists and visitors to any city look at buildings and they look at architecture and they look at the kind of civic systems that we all have. Whenever we visit a city, we remember parts of it. And I think this series of 5 stations will become a tourist trail. And I think we've seen there's an incredible amount of stuff underground. I mean, it's interesting seeing Hassel's sections where we will be left with a marker above the ground, which is really quite small. Down below, we saw in those sections the incredible amount of engineering and input from everybody that will realise these. But each collaboration has been each one is really local. That's why Anzac looks different to State Library, looks different to Parkville. They each have their own kind of local signature, and each one is about its own locale. So to me, they couldn't be in any other city, these.
No, and cities are really known for their public architecture, aren't they? If you think about all the great cities of the world and you think about what you know and you love about them, there's something about the public architecture or the public places. So it becomes, I think this will really weave its way into the consciousness of Melbourne as a city as well. It's a really beautiful project. I think we all understand that it takes an incredible amount of work and effort to deliver a project like this. I suppose, how did you all collaborate and what was the most kind of interesting parts of the process for you?
Is that one for me?
Oh, sure.
Well, I came here in 2017. I spent a month here in Melbourne, very much enjoyed the city. As a European, it seems to be, to me, the most European one. It's the one I feel most comfortable with. I'm not a great one for sun, so the rain I love.
I've turned it on for you.
It was August. It was August, So everyone told me, oh, it can get a bit grim here in August. I didn't really believe it, but you're right. It's almost as bad as London. But I have to say, in my career, and I'm not just saying this because I'm sitting here talking to you all, but it was actually one of the most enjoyable times I had, partly because I was focused on one project, and for so long I've been focused across many, many projects. So I had a moment to actually really think about something, and engaging with everyone who'd been involved, listening to them, and just trying to sort of reflect those inputs. Meeting, I think we met Jill and her team probably twice a week. I mean, and we were going so fast, and it was all, and the great thing was it was all hand sketches, and I love that. I feel relevant again. And it was a very, I think we got a very quick shorthand together that got us very quickly from an arrangement which had been very well established. So the principles, as Ingrid described, some fantastic principles. And so I was really here to just to be almost the sort of, to sort of reflect what people were talking about and to try to just help distill it so it could move forward in a good way. And I think even in that short space of time, I can, looking at some of those sketches, everything's different, but it's sort of the same. I mean, those ideas of a moment, those ideas of experience, watching the young couples in Kaohsiung posing in front of the metro station, that'll happen here. I'm absolutely sure. And there is a website, world's favourite metro stations. As I say, we'll make that.
You'll all have to get on there and vote. We'll find out about that, where that is for you next. Ingrid, what was the most interesting part of the process for you?
Yeah, I mean, as Ivan said, it was a true collaboration. I think everyone was so excited to work together in it, and we sat together. We didn't sit in our separate offices. We had a separate project office where the whole team sat together. We sat with the engineers, and we worked together on it, as Ivan said, at pace, particularly at the start there. And one of the things I'm the most proud of, particularly within the Hassel team, and I know this has happened across the whole project in all the teams, is that people have stayed. Like, this has been going for 8 years for us, and people have stayed in the project. We've still got people that were working in the project day one, and they've stayed and they've said, I want to finish this. I want to, I'm part of this. And there's a real pride in the team. And that's something, you often, when we looked at it, we said, we're going to have to rotate people through the project. People are going to, want to go and work on different projects. But the majority of our teams, and I know that's across all three of the firms, have stayed attached to the project. And I think that's quite unique.
I think that's a real testament to the project. Jill, slightly more from the outside, what was some of the most interesting parts of the project for you?
I guess one of the great things that the Government Architect's Office, having been involved since day one, we were involved when the brief was written, and we were involved in what the urban design and civic principles looked like embedded in the project. And then I've had one of my team members on the project as long as you guys have been on it, and I've been on it as long as you guys too. So that 7 to 8 year journey that we've had to date, it's been fantastic having the same people in the room. We've all got to know each other pretty well, great deal of collaborative discussion and input, etc. So yeah, I'm really proud that my team has been on it since day one. We'll all be there when we cut the ribbon, which is great too. The other thing, I suppose, if we're talking about something special about it, I've also loved the way some of our local artisans and product designers have been involved in the project. And that, probably going back to your previous question about what makes it Melbourne, there's been some input from, what were small fabricators and who've been given this incredible opportunity to be part of a really significant project, and I'm sure it will be really good for their own businesses too. to have been part of that. And I'm not sure if we're allowed to mention the artwork, because I'm sure that will get exposed to the community at some stage, but that's the other part of the whole thing, is the artists who've been involved. It's going to be another layer to the architecture, which will be extremely rich.
And I also have to say, I think that the artwork throughout the project has been really interesting. So snaps to the Metro Tunnel, the creative programs team. I think the stuff on the hoardings, the artworks, the temporary artworks on the hoardings have been really wonderful for me, like catching the tram up Swanston Street, and to see the kind of different ways that, I know this is disrupting the city, but to see that, trying to give back to the city in a cultural way the whole way through. And I think that's been a really strong foundation of the entire project. I also think the engineering and the kind of prototyping around the project seems really fascinating to me. We probably don't have a huge amount of time to go into it today, and hopefully we can unpack some of those stories a little bit more as we lead up to 2025. But are there any kind of engineering or prototyping stories that you want to share with us, Ingrid or Ivan?
I think, one of the great things that was done by the CYP team was set up the prototype area. So out at the old Footscray Flower Market, there were a whole lot of mini bits of Metro, life-size built, but sections of it built. So everyone could go and explore and test and make sure, and it was a great process, I think, for all of us to go and see it, before it was actually on site. Everything was tested, all those artisans, everyone that was involved was able to interact with that. So that was great to have that kind of testing bed, which, I think will help the ultimate quality of the project.
Yeah, we had to go at night. At night.
It was all top secret.
Yeah, it was very top secret, and visits to the flower market at night, so that we could see how the lighting was working and how the colours worked in that particular underground kind of environment. So it's been a long process of testing scale and detail and the precision that Ivan talked about.
Fantastic. I want to go tour that site now. But anyway, we'll leave that for another day. I think there are always some key challenges in delivering a project like this. What were the key challenges for each of you, and how did we kind of solve them?
I think for us, the challenge was communication within our practice. We have a team here, but we had to come here so quickly. We could never have the whole team here. So, we had people in London coordinating with the team here, and it never worked perfectly, despite what everyone says with all the newfangled technology. There's nothing quite like being in place. And, we've had, Elena, who's in the audience here, has been here, came with me on that first visit and is still here. She's now Australian. And she's lived and breathed the project. So the continuity thing is really important. But the difficulty is communication is really hard face-to-face. It's impossible on Zoom.
And we had to do a lot of it during COVID as well. So we were just forced into that. Even the ones of us that were all in the room together, all of a sudden weren't in the room together and had to do that. So that was one of the big challenges, I think. But another one that I think it's more of a positive than a negative challenge was, again, how the whole project was run. It was all about engaging all of the stakeholders kind of all of the time. So there were so many stakeholders involved. When you look at the City of Melbourne, the university, the Shrine of Remembrance, City of Port Phillip, all of the people that are affected along the way. There was the people that lived in the city square above the Western Hotel. There was, everyone had a voice, but I think even though that took time and energy, it allowed people to understand what was happening and to have their say. And so I don't think anyone that's in that stakeholder group will have any surprises when it opens or any disappointments, because they've been able to be a part of the journey. So I think that's been a really strong element of the project that's engaged so many Melburnians that are going to be affected by it.
Yeah, and bringing people along on part of the story is actually helping them to connect to these places before they even open up.
I've got a funny little story on that front. We were doing a public presentation on Zoom, and it was around the Anzac station, and so anyone could attend it, and they were allowed to ask questions. And someone asked whether we would be able to fix the squeaky wheels on the trams as they went round the corner.
You personally?
Just add that.
Us and my one of my landscape team said, it's probably not quite in my remit to be able to do that, but we'll pass that on for you and see what we can do.
But I'm sure you passed it on, and it's all better now.
Yeah.
That's really cute. That's gorgeous. I love the way people engage with all the different parts of the city. I think it's really important. I'm going to throw to audience questions now-ish. Actually, I've got one more. But what we're going to ask you to do is to put through your questions via this Slido QR code. And I'm going to find Slido because it's just missing. And I'll be able to see them up here and read some of them out because we're filming this, so it just makes it a little bit easier for us. And while you're formulating some questions that you want to throw to Slido, I'm going to ask people here on my panel, I think a bit of a tricky question because it's like having a favourite child. What's your favourite station? Or if you don't want to say it's your favourite, what station do you feel most connected to and why? Oh, who am I going to go to?
You're not asking me first.
Oh, go on. Now you've spoken, you've got to go first.
I think having just visited them all again this week, I think, it's like children. You can't really have a favourite. They're all lovely in some way, but in different ways. I think I was in Arden. And Arden, to me, when it was going up, seemed to be the grandest one. But when I came, it seemed to be quite intimate this time, and less grand. Whereas what we call Domain Anzac, again, with that, that canopy, it gives you a sort of sense of you're not quite sure if it's scale. Sometimes it feels sort of quite petite, but actually it's almost as long as a football pitch. So this sort of scale change, every time you visit them, you get something different from them. And I think, they're like kids. They're all good. In their way.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to give you a favourite, no way. I mean, I think, well, if I had to, it would probably be Anzac. And part of that is because I drive past it every day, so I've been able to watch it build from when it was nothing. But I just think that, that, as Ivan just said, the scale of it is quite deceptive from different angles. So when you're right underneath it, it's quite huge, but when you see it from a distance, it's quite, it's not trying to compete with St Kilda Road and the Shrine and all of the other things that are around it. So I think it's got a nice scale to it.
Beautiful. Jill, do you have a favourite child?
No, I'm going to exactly the same. I think they all have merit and they're all quite different. So it is very hard to pull them out. I guess one of the things I was going to say is as I've watched them be detailed, built and constructed and detailed, I think it's kind of confirmed the skill that has been put into it because they're all very beautifully put together. And sometimes when there is an architectural piece that, if I used Anzac as an example, put together with less precision, it would look a bit like a parasol sitting there, but it's so beautifully engineered, so beautifully designed, so beautifully detailed and beautifully constructed, so it looks like a piece of architectural legacy, not a parasol. So I think as each one has been finished, it's a real testament, I think, to the commitment that's been really taken from everybody involved in these right from day one, that we're not just solving this kind of engineering and public transport problem, we're actually really doing something that's got incredible status in our city.
And we're talking about the quality of the public realm, aren't we?
Yeah.
There's kind of a question on time and cost in here, and I think Jill's actually just answered that really well, because it's actually about kind of time, cost and quality, and the fact that these stations are here for the next 150 years. Is that what you said, Ivan?
Yeah, I think it's important that they're not trying to be of the moment. They need to have a level of integrity that allows them to be durable. But mentioning cost, I think one of the things that I see here is an amazing, from those who are making the pieces, making the parts that go together, there's an immense amount of enthusiasm, and that is reflected in the outcome of the quality. It doesn't cost anything.
Yep. And when you take it out over the next 150 years, it's just an incredible piece of infrastructure for the city. There's also questions here on colour and the choices around colour. Can somebody speak to that, please?
I shouldn't.
I'm wearing one of the colours. You have to answer that.
I have to answer that. Well, I need your take too. But, when we started proposing, well, first of all, we didn't start with colour, and not let's say a colour that would draw your attention. And quite unusually, because everyone thinks we will do a Pompidou Centre again, until we were asked. I got a sense that, and I think that's the right way, because I think you can be diverted by conversations on colour. So what you'll see is essentially the colour is used to sort of code things. Ingrid talked about this sort of mesh of booms that sort of we sort of connect across all of the station spaces, but leave them quite open and airy. And it was, that has become a sort of characteristic. So there was a choice of colour for that. There was a choice of colour to pick up moments of sort of highlights particularly around lighting. And then a choice of colour about exiting and entering, which is a third colour. But the three colours sit within a spectrum which relates to a Melbourne sunrise. So it ranges from, pink, yellow, orange. And it's a sort of warm part of the spectrum. And those are happy colours. And I think certainly when you're in a below ground space where, artificial lighting, once we've finally in the last minute had to get away from the daylight, it's really, the lighting is super important. And I haven't seen it on Town Hall or State Library yet, but in the other three stations with the big drum lights, which Ingrid described earlier, the concept behind those, not my concept, but we have a fantastic lighting designer on this project, is they said, when you enter these stations, you will look at those lights and you will believe that these stations are lit by those lights alone. And you go down there, and even though I know they're not, I think they are. And I think that's that's a skill in that design.
It's also something for you all to look for now when we finally get into these things. See if you can find the extra lighting. We've had some fantastic questions come through, but I'm going to have to move us along and start to wrap it up. And I wanted to ask the last question. Of course, that's my prerogative. So really, you've all been in this project and encased in this project and kind of embedded in this project for so long. But I want you now to kind of maybe think about legacy and the key impact that you think this project will have on Melbourne as a city and the legacy that it will leave in years to come. Ingrid, can I start with you?
Start with me. I think I've kind of covered it. I think it's going to really help Melbournes connect across the city much better than they currently do. We've got some real congestion issues in and around Melbourne that I think we're seeing more on the weekends, weirdly enough at the moment, rather than during the week still. But I I think it's going to really help unlock some of that congestion, make it really easy for people to navigate and get around the city, and hopefully, as I said earlier, provide a bit of joy when they're during their commute or their travelling time.
Jill, do you have any thoughts on impact and legacy?
Well, I have already talked about that concept of joining the best metros in the world. I'm sure that we'll be one of those. That's not obviously what the project is for. It's for congestion relief. But one of the things I think it is also going to be really interesting to see it do to Melbourne. Melbourne's got one of the busiest tram networks in the world, and I know that that little piece of St Kilda Road, that basically is where the metro is going to go, has more trams per minute or half hour or hour than any other road in the world, from what I understand. So what this will do is we'll actually remove some passengers, and it will allow that very busy corridor of St Kilda Road to probably shift to being maybe slightly less trams, maybe slightly less people on the trams, and particularly those that are jumping all the way to the university or all the way to Arden and trying to skip the CBD, it will take them off the tram network, which is always good for congestion and people, too many people on our public transport. But I do think it's a great celebration of a city's belief in public transport in a philosophical way.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe from a little bit of an international perspective, Ivan, key impact and legacy.
Well, London, somewhat later than planned and much more expensive than planned, completed the Elizabeth line probably, it seems, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It's already apparently hit its capacity. It's been hugely successful, and it's the same model as Metro Tunnel here. It is taking existing lines that were going to a terminus and has run them through the city. And there's such excitement about what it's doing, not least making the city more affordable for people. I mean, as we have here, I'm sure, and London for sure too, is pricing out the current young generation out of the market, and they're further and further away. But it gets people to the heart of the city very quickly. It also gives the opportunity, and this is London's been building on that too, of reaching that sort of ideal of the polycentric city. So it's not just about one central place. That connectivity, so important. I was looking at some statistics with coming here in case I was asked a question about them, but London has, is 10th of the area. Greater London is a 10th of the area of Greater Melbourne. It has twice as many people, crudely, in that. So it's obviously, and London is not a dense city, but London has 700 stations. About half of them are metro and half of them are heavy rail stations. And it shifts at 1.5 billion movements a year. And Melbourne currently is shifting about 250 million a year. And it's interesting looking at those sort of comparisons, because you need, if you're going to take all these people, you're going to have to densify your city. You can't keep spreading it out. You have to densify, and the consequences of that is you have to have a transport system that really works for you. My kids, I call them kids, they're in their late 20s, they don't drive. Well, they say, what do I need a car for, Dad? I've got to just get out on the tube and Uber. It's, there's a sort of, when you get to that level of density and capacity, the mindset, needs to change. And, that as a place, it will change your relationship to it, and the car will no longer be the thing that you sort of live for every day.
I think it's an amazing project, and I think we've really seen today the changes that it's going to catalyse in the city, and I think we'll be seeing them into the future as people realise the potential of what this is going to do, not only for the stations themselves, but the life that they will bring to the precincts where all the people kind of pop up from these stations in, and it'll be great, absolutely fantastic for the city. So we're so looking forward to seeing them in real life, but we'll have to wait a little bit longer. Anyway, I'd like you to join me in thanking Ivan, Jill and Ingrid. And I'd also like to thank Nicole Stoddard, CEO of the Metro Tunnel Project Office. Rail's Civic Infrastructure has been presented by Open House Melbourne in partnership with the Metro Tunnel Creative Program. And a special thanks to Therese, Sarah and Riley for their support in presenting today's Catalyst conversation. And finally, I'd like to thank everyone, all of you, for joining us here today, and we hope you've enjoyed this event. And if you'd like to see more events of ours in the future, please visit our website. And on that note, I'm going to leave you with some extra behind-the-scenes footage from Anzac Station. Thank you all for coming.